The soft glow of Sarah Johnson's desk lamp cast shadows across stacks of fifth-grade math assignments at 2:13 a.m. Her red pen hovered over Marcus Thompson's paper, noting how his work showed improvement despite the wrong final answer. She drew a small star next to his detailed problem-solving steps, the kind of encouragement that might make the difference between giving up and trying again tomorrow. Stretching in her chair, Sarah glanced at the family photo on her desk. 3 generations of Johnson women at her graduate school ceremony. Her mother beamed with pride, and her grandmother, who had worked as a housekeeper to put Sarah's mother through college, held the frame of her master's degree in education. The memory of their sacrifices kept her going through nights like these. At 6:45 a.m., Sarah's alarm pierced through her brief sleep. She had dozed off on the couch, still wearing yesterday's blouse and pencil skirt. The parent-teacher conferences were approaching, and she needed every evaluation to reflect not just grades, but each student's unique journey, especially for children like Marcus, whose potential often went unseen behind his struggling test scores. "Morning, Miss Sarah," called Mr. Wilson, her elderly neighbor, as she rushed to her car. He was tending to his prize roses, the same way he had every morning since Sarah moved into the apartment complex 5 years ago. She waved back, her other hand juggling a travel mug of coffee, her laptop bag, and a box of carefully graded papers. The morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Sarah navigated her silver Honda Civic through familiar streets. Her mind raced ahead to Marcus, who had finally agreed to morning tutoring sessions after months of gentle persistence. His message last night revealed why math had become such a challenge. He had been helping his single mother with his younger siblings, leaving homework until late hours when his tired mind couldn't focus. Sarah checked her watch. 7:10 a.m. Marcus would be waiting in the school cafeteria, probably hungry since his mother left for her early shift before breakfast. The bag of granola bars and fruit she'd picked up yesterday sat in her passenger seat. Teaching had taught her that hungry students couldn't learn, no matter how brilliant the lesson plan. The traffic light ahead turned yellow. Sarah's foot hesitated between brake and accelerator. Marcus's words from yesterday echoed in her mind. "Nobody ever stayed after to help me before, Ms. Johnson. They just said I wasn't trying hard enough." The light turned red, but the intersection was clear. She pressed the accelerator, her speedometer climbing past the limit. Wind rushed through her cracked window, carrying the scent of blooming magnolias from the trees lining Carlton Avenue. Sarah rehearsed her morning plan. 20 minutes of breakfast and math with Marcus, then preparation for her first period class. She had promised to return their science projects today, each one graded with personal notes about their creative approaches to understanding photosynthesis. The school's brick building came into view, its flag dancing in the morning breeze. Sarah felt the familiar surge of purpose that had driven her through a decade of teaching. Every morning represented new possibilities, new chances to reach students who needed someone to believe in them. As she turned into the faculty parking lot, her rearview mirror filled with flashing blue lights, and her heart sank into her stomach. The morning's carefully laid plans began to unravel, one flashing pulse at a time. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel at exactly 10 and 2 o'clock, just as her father had taught her 20 years ago. "Keep your license and registration ready," his voice echoed in her memory. "Speak clearly, move slowly." James Johnson had prepared his daughter for this moment through countless dinner table conversations, his wisdom drawn from 30 years as a postal worker who understood the delicate dance of daily interactions. Through her side mirror, Sarah watched Officer Miller emerge from his patrol car. Young, perhaps in his early 30s, with pressed uniform and polished badge catching the morning sun. Her breath steadied as she remembered her father's words. "You're a professional, Sarah. Always carry yourself with dignity." "License and registration, please," Officer Miller said, his tone clipped and official. Sarah noticed his hand resting casually on his belt as she reached slowly for her glove compartment. The morning breeze carried the scent of his coffee, probably from the same cafe where she sometimes graded papers on weekends. "Good morning, officer," Sarah responded, her voice carrying the same warm professionalism she used in parent conferences. "I apologize for my speed. I'm a teacher at Carlton Elementary, and one of my students is waiting for morning tutoring." She handed over her documents, including the school ID that hung from her rearview mirror. Officer Miller studied her license, then glanced at the box of graded papers visible on her passenger seat. Red pen marks peeked through the clear plastic container, evidence of her late-night dedication. His expression softened slightly, but his stance remained formal. "Ms. Johnson, our radar clocked you at 43 in a 30 zone," he stated, returning to his official tone. "That's more than 12 miles over the limit." He paused, looking at her clean driving record on his tablet. Even teachers have to follow traffic laws. Sarah's phone buzzed in her purse, probably Marcus's mother checking if her son had arrived for tutoring. The digital clock on her dashboard read 7:22 a.m. Each passing minute felt like a small betrayal of Marcus's trust, the trust she had spent months building. "I understand, officer," Sarah replied, her mind racing between concern for Marcus and the reality of her situation. "It's my first offense in 10 years of driving. I know that doesn't excuse my speed, but I hope you'll consider a warning. That student really needs my help this morning." Officer Miller's radio crackled with dispatcher codes, breaking the tension. He stepped back, comparing her license photo to her face once more. Sarah noticed his nameplate glinting in the morning sun. T. Miller. She wondered if he had teachers who believed in him, who stayed late to help him understand difficult concepts. "I appreciate your honesty, Ms. Johnson," he said, returning to his patrol car. Sarah watched in her mirrors as he typed on his computer. The minutes stretched like warm taffy, each second pulling her further from her morning commitment. When Officer Miller returned, he held not a warning slip, but a yellow citation. "You'll need to appear in court," he explained, his voice maintaining its professional distance. "Judge Barrett's courtroom, next Wednesday at 9 a.m. The citation includes all the details." Sarah accepted the paper, her fingers trembling slightly. As Officer Miller walked away, she noticed Marcus's mother had texted twice. The boy was waiting in the cafeteria, probably watching the door, wondering if today would be another disappointment in his young life. Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and started her car. She had 8 minutes to transform this setback into a teaching moment, both for Marcus and herself. The teacher's lounge hummed with afternoon conversation, but Sarah sat quietly in the corner, her lunch untouched as she typed detailed notes on her laptop. The morning's events with Marcus had only strengthened her resolve. Despite arriving late, she had found him still waiting, his faith in her evident in his bright smile. They had worked through 2 math problems before the bell rang, and his proud "I get it now" echoed in her mind as she organized her thoughts. Principal Rodriguez paused by her table, coffee mug in hand. "Sarah, you've been documenting something intensely for days now. Everything all right?" Her concern was genuine. In 8 years working together, she had come to rely on Sarah's unwavering dedication to their students. "Remember that traffic stop I mentioned?" Sarah looked up, her screen reflecting the glow of carefully organized folders. "I'm preparing for court next week, but it's become something more than just fighting a ticket." She turned her laptop, showing her principal the meticulous records of her teaching career. There were photos of science fairs where her students beamed beside projects exploring renewable energy, letters from parents describing how their children had discovered a love for learning in her classroom, documentation of the free tutoring program she had started 3 years ago, which had helped raise the school's math scores by 12%. "Maria," Sarah said, using her principal's first name as she did in their private conversations, "that morning made me realize something. Our students face moments every day where they have to prove their worth, prove they deserve a chance. I teach them to stand up with preparation and grace. Now it's my turn to show them how." Principal Rodriguez pulled up a chair, her coffee forgotten. "What do you need from me?" she asked, recognizing the same determination Sarah showed when advocating for struggling students. "A letter," Sarah replied, pulling up another document. Not just about my teaching record, but about the changes you've seen in our students. Like Marcus Thompson. Remember when he was ready to give up on math entirely? She smiled, thinking of his breakthrough that morning. Now he's not only improving, he's helping other students during group work. The afternoon sun slanted through the lounge windows, casting long shadows across Sarah's organized stacks of documentation. Each paper represented a story of persistence, of small victories won through patience and belief. Her citation lay beneath it all, no longer just a punishment, but a catalyst for showcasing the ripple effects of dedicated teaching. You know, Principal Rodriguez said, studying the collection of evidence, most people would just pay the fine and move on. But you're turning this into a lesson for all of us. She paused, then added, "That's why you're one of our best, Sarah. You see the bigger picture." Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus's mother thanking her for the morning session. Attached was a photo of his math homework, completed right after school, with a proud "did this by myself" scrawled at the top. Sarah added it to her growing digital folder. As the final bell rang and students' voices filled the hallways, Sarah refined her courthouse presentation. Beyond the statistics and recommendations lay the heart of her defense, the simple truth that every interaction, whether in a classroom or a courtroom, carried the potential for learning and growth. Principal Rodriguez returned with a sealed envelope. "My letter," she said, placing it carefully among Sarah's documents. "Remember what you always tell the kids before a big test. Preparation meets opportunity." She squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently. "Show them what we already know, that sometimes the best teachers are the ones who never stop being students themselves." The marble floors of the municipal courthouse echoed with Sarah's measured steps as she arrived 30 minutes early, her portfolio tucked professionally under her arm. The morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden benches where a handful of early arrivals sat reviewing papers or scrolling through phones. At the security checkpoint, Officer Jensen, the elderly guard, noticed her teacher's ID as she placed her belongings in the plastic bin. "Carlton Elementary." He smiled. "My granddaughter Jessica had you last year. She's in middle school now, top of her math class." Sarah remembered Jessica's transformation from a quiet student who hid her answers to one who confidently helped others. Small victories that led to bigger ones. "That's wonderful to hear," Sarah replied, collecting her belongings. "Please tell her Ms. Johnson says hello." These connections, these ripples of influence, strengthened her resolve. She found a seat in courtroom 3, observing as Judge William Barrett's chamber slowly filled. The proceedings began precisely at 9 a.m. Judge Barrett, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, carried himself with an air of practiced authority. Sarah noticed how he handled each case before hers. A speeding ticket reduced after a young man explained his rush to reach his father in the hospital. A parking violation dismissed when an elderly woman showed proof of a broken meter. She watched the judge's face, recognizing the same attentive expression she used when students explained their reasoning on test answers. His questions were direct but not unkind, his decisions swift but measured. Sarah adjusted her own planned responses, drawing on 20 years of experience reading a room. When the clerk called Sarah Johnson, her voice carried the same confidence she used during parent-teacher conferences. Judge Barrett glanced up from his papers, his expression neutral as she approached the podium. "Your Honor," Sarah began, laying out her documents with careful precision, "I stand before you with a decade of clean driving history and a deep commitment to my community." She spoke clearly, the way she taught her students to present their science projects. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she shared her story, not just of that morning's rush to help Marcus, but of 10 years teaching children to believe in themselves. She presented Principal Rodriguez's letter, her documented history of community service, the tutoring program's success rates. Judge Barrett's expression remained unchanged, but his questions shifted. "Ms. Johnson, why should your profession influence my decision about a traffic violation?" His tone carried a note Sarah recognized from difficult parent conferences, a challenge wrapped in formality. "Your Honor," she responded, thinking of Marcus's proud smile over solved equations. "I'm not asking for special treatment because I'm a teacher. I'm showing you who I am as a member of our community. The same person who teaches children to take responsibility for their actions is standing here taking responsibility for mine." She noted how the judge's clerk paused her typing, how the bailiff's normally stoic expression softened slightly. These small signs, like the subtle shifts in students' body language when understanding finally clicked, told their own story. Judge Barrett studied her documentation longer than he had others' evidence. The courtroom's silence hung heavy with anticipation. Sarah stood straight, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "Your dignity isn't given or taken by others. It's carried in how you carry yourself." As the judge looked up to deliver his decision, Sarah realized this moment would become another lesson for her students, not about avoiding consequences, but about facing them with grace and preparation. Whatever came next would be part of a larger story about standing tall while remaining humble, about the power of bringing your whole self to every challenge. Judge Barrett's voice cut through the courtroom silence like a chalk line across a clean board. "Ms. Johnson, your credentials are impressive, and your community service is noted." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "However, the law must be applied consistently. I'm setting your fine at $450, plus mandatory attendance at a defensive driving course." Sarah's heart skipped, remembering the earlier cases: $150 for the man rushing to the hospital, $175 for a delivery driver with multiple violations. Her teacher's salary, already stretched thin by classroom supplies and student breakfast snacks, would feel this impact. Still, she maintained her professional composure, the same way she did when facing unexpected challenges in her classroom. Additionally, Judge Barrett continued, "The course must be completed within 30 days. Do you understand these terms, Ms. Johnson?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah responded, her voice steady. In her peripheral vision, she noticed the clerk's slight frown, a subtle shift that reminded her of her students' reactions when they sensed unfairness in the playground. As she gathered her documents, a young law intern who had been observing the proceedings approached. "Ms. Johnson," she whispered, "I've been documenting cases for my research paper. Would you be willing to share your experience? I've noticed some patterns." Sarah looked at the intern's notebook, filled with careful annotations and statistics. It reminded her of her own meticulous gradebook, where patterns in test scores often revealed deeper stories about her students' needs. "Of course," she replied, exchanging contact information. In the courthouse hallway, Sarah ran into Mr. Peterson, whose hospital rush case had preceded hers. "I couldn't help overhearing," he said, genuine concern in his voice. "I'm an accountant, and something doesn't add up here." He handed her his business card, then added quietly, "My daughter's a teacher too. This doesn't sit right." Rather than heading straight to school, Sarah found herself in the courthouse library, a quiet space smelling of old books and furniture polish. She began researching similar cases, her teacher's instinct for investigation taking over. The librarian, Mrs. Torres, noticed her focused expression and brought over relevant records without being asked. "Been here 20 years, Mrs. Torres said softly, placing another volume beside Sarah. "Seen a lot of cases come and go. Sometimes the most important lessons aren't the ones we expect to learn." She tapped the court records meaningfully before returning to her desk. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Got a B+ on my math quiz. First time ever." Attached was a photo of his test, complete with his careful showing of all work, just as she'd taught him. The contrast between his achievement and her morning setback struck her deeply. Opening her laptop, Sarah began a new document. At the top, she typed, "Analysis of traffic court proceedings, patterns, and observations." Her education training kicked in. Document everything. Look for trends. Identify areas for improvement. This wasn't just about her case anymore. It was about understanding a system that affected her entire community. As she worked, Sarah remembered telling her students about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, how sometimes the path to positive change started with careful documentation of uncomfortable truths. She wasn't seeking to challenge authority, but to understand it, to learn from it, and perhaps to help it grow. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the library windows as Sarah continued her research. Each page turn, each entry in her growing database, felt like another step on an unexpected journey. She had come to court expecting a simple traffic hearing, but was leaving with something far more significant. A new understanding of how small moments of inequity could become opportunities for meaningful change. Sunlight streamed through the classroom windows as Sarah pinned up student artwork, each piece celebrating historical figures who had created positive change through peaceful means. It was Saturday morning, 3 weeks after her court appearance, and her research had taken an unexpected turn into a teaching opportunity. "Miss Johnson." Marcus's voice startled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway with his mother, Lisa, both carrying boxes of muffins. "Mom said we could help you set up for the community forum." Sarah smiled, remembering how her Saturday morning tutoring sessions had evolved into something larger. The classroom slowly filled with familiar faces. Mr. Peterson, the accountant from court, arranged chairs while discussing budget analysis with Lisa. The young law intern, Amy Chen, now a regular collaborator, set up her laptop to present her research findings. Even Mrs. Torres from the courthouse library had come, carrying decades of archived records she'd helped Sarah analyze. "Remember," Sarah addressed the gathering group, "this isn't about pointing fingers. It's about understanding patterns and working together for positive solutions." She had repeated these words like a mantra during their planning sessions, drawing on her years of experience mediating classroom conflicts. Amy stood to present her findings, her confidence grown since their first courthouse meeting. "Over the past 3 weeks, we've documented 200 traffic cases," she began, displaying neat charts. "The data shows significant disparities in fine amounts and treatment, but more importantly, it reveals opportunities for community dialogue." Sarah watched her students' parents engage with the presentation, asking thoughtful questions. In the back, she noticed Principal Rodriguez slip in quietly, followed by 2 members of the school board. The ripples were spreading, just as they did when one student's success inspired others to believe in themselves. Lisa Thompson, Marcus's mother, raised her hand. "I've started a support network for families facing similar situations," she announced. "Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference." Sarah remembered their conversation weeks ago, how Lisa's initial anger had transformed into determination to help others. The meeting shifted into small group discussions. Sarah moved between tables, listening as community members shared experiences and brainstormed solutions. Her teacher's instinct for facilitating productive dialogue proved valuable in this new context. "You've created something remarkable here," Principal Rodriguez whispered, joining her at the observation point. "This is what real education looks like, bringing people together to learn from each other." Sarah nodded, thinking of her original court appearance. "I realize that feeling powerless doesn't mean being powerless," she replied. "Every day, I teach students to find their voices through knowledge and understanding. I had to practice what I teach." As the forum continued, Sarah noticed Marcus helping younger children with a poster project about community heroes. His confidence had grown beyond mathematics, spreading into leadership. She thought about Judge Barrett's verdict, how what had felt like an ending had become a beginning. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across classroom floors as participants began to leave, carrying with them new connections and action plans. Amy stayed behind, reviewing her notes. "Sarah," she said, using her first name for the first time, "my professors want me to develop this research into a thesis. Would you consider being interviewed for it?" Sarah looked around her classroom, at the walls covered in student work and now community action plans. Each piece told a story of growth through challenge, of learning through doing. "Of course," she replied. "But let's make it more than an interview. Let's document how education and understanding can bridge any divide." As she locked up the classroom, Sarah paused at Marcus's latest math test, displayed proudly on the bulletin board. Next to it hung a new edition, the Community Forum's mission statement, written collaboratively. Through understanding, we grow. Through growth, we change. Through change, we build a better tomorrow. The law school auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Sarah sat in the front row, watching Amy Chen prepare for her thesis presentation, Community Justice, Understanding and Bridging Divides. 6 months had passed since that first traffic court appearance, and the journey had taken unexpected turns. Dean Matthews adjusted his microphone, introducing the presentation. Today's research represents a unique collaboration between our law school and the local community. His eyes met Sarah's with respect. It demonstrates how single moments can spark meaningful dialogue. As Amy began her presentation, Sarah noticed familiar faces in the audience. Mr. Peterson sat with his accountant colleagues, their data analysis having provided crucial support. Mrs. Torres from the courthouse library beamed proudly. Her archives had helped connect historical patterns to present-day experiences. Lisa Thompson had brought several members of her support network, their presence a testament to growing community engagement. Our research began with a simple traffic court observation, Amy explained, displaying her findings. But it revealed something more profound: the power of informed dialogue in creating understanding. Her charts showed not just statistics, but stories of how community forums had opened channels of communication. Sarah's attention shifted to movement at the back of the auditorium. Judge Barrett had entered quietly, taking the seat in the last row. Their eyes met briefly, and he nodded, an acknowledgement that surprised her. She remembered his words from their recent unexpected encounter at the grocery store. "Your approach has given me much to consider, Ms. Johnson." Marcus, now in 6th grade and thriving in advanced math, sat with his mother, taking careful notes. He had become a regular speaker at community youth forums, sharing how education and support had changed his perspective on learning. "Everyone deserves a chance to be heard," he often said, echoing Sarah's classroom philosophy. Amy's presentation reached its core message. Through Ms. Johnson's initiative, we've seen how education extends beyond classroom walls. The community forums have led to 3 significant developments. She clicked to her next slide. 1. A new court observation program, staffed by law students and community volunteers. 2. Monthly dialogue sessions between legal professionals and community members. 3. A mentorship program pairing experienced educators with youth interested in law and justice. Principal Rodriguez, seated beside Sarah, squeezed her hand as Amy described the school's role in hosting these initiatives. The elementary school had become a bridge between different parts of the community, fulfilling its educational mission in unexpected ways. During the question and answer session, a law student raised her hand. "How do you maintain momentum in community engagement?" she asked. Before Amy could respond, Sarah found herself standing, drawn by the teacher's instinct to share a learning moment. "The same way we maintain enthusiasm in a classroom," Sarah answered, her voice carrying the warmth of experience. "We celebrate small victories, learn from setbacks, and remember that every person's story matters. Change happens one conversation, one understanding, one connection at a time." As the presentation concluded, Judge Barrett made his way forward through the crowd. He stopped at Sarah's row, his formal demeanor softened by months of attending community forums. "Ms. Johnson," he said, loud enough for nearby attendees to hear, "your traffic violation led to something I never expected. A lesson in listening. Sometimes the best teachers are those who help us see beyond our usual perspective." Sarah watched as Marcus approached the judge, offering him a copy of the latest community newsletter. On its cover was a photo of their most recent forum, where people from all walks of life sat together, sharing stories and building understanding. The headline read, "Building Bridges: How One Community Turned Challenge into Change." The afternoon sun streamed through the auditorium windows, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Sarah realized that this moment, like every moment in her teaching career, was part of a larger lesson about resilience, about growth, and about the endless possibilities that arise when people choose to learn from each other. 1 year after her traffic stop, Sarah stood before a different audience, new teachers at Carleton Elementary's Orientation Day. The morning light painted her classroom in familiar warmth as she shared not lesson plans, but life lessons. Teaching isn't just about what happens within these walls, she began, gesturing to the classroom where it all started. It's about the ripples we create in our community. Behind her, a wall of photos told the story of the past year. Community forums, youth mentorship programs, and bridges built between unlikely allies. Marcus, now a middle school student, had asked to speak at this orientation. He stood tall beside his former teacher, his confidence evident in his steady voice. "Ms. Johnson taught me more than math," he told the new teachers. "She showed me that every challenge can become an opportunity to learn and grow." The room fell silent as Sarah played a video compilation, clips from their monthly community dialogues. Judge Barrett appeared on screen, speaking at their latest forum. "This initiative has transformed how we approach justice in our community. We've implemented new training programs, revised our procedures, and most importantly, opened our ears and hearts to truly listen." Sarah paused the video, turning to the new teachers. "That traffic ticket cost me $450, she said with a gentle smile. "But what we built from that moment, priceless." The room chuckled, but the deeper meaning wasn't lost on anyone. Principal Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a letter from the State Board of Education. "Sarah's program has been selected as a model for other districts," she announced. "Sometimes the best curriculum isn't in our textbooks, it's in how we handle life's unexpected lessons." The orientation shifted to small group discussions, just like their community forums. Sarah watched as veteran teachers shared stories with newcomers about how the past year had changed their approach to teaching. Mrs. Torres, now a regular classroom visitor, taught students about research and documentation. Mr. Peterson's accounting club helped kids understand math through real-world examples. Amy Chen, now a practicing lawyer, slipped into the classroom during the break. "Guess what?" she whispered excitedly to Sarah. "The state Supreme Court just approved funding for our community justice education program. We're expanding to 10 more districts." Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Lisa Thompson, with a photo of Marcus's latest achievement, student body president. He ran on a platform of building understanding between different student groups. The message read, "Sound familiar?" As the orientation wrapped up, Sarah noticed a new face in the back of the room. Officer Miller, the one who had given her the ticket. He had become a regular participant in their youth outreach programs, sharing his own perspective and learning from others. "Ms. Johnson," he said, approaching her desk, "I've been assigned as the new school resource officer. After everything I've learned in your forums, I requested this position specifically. I want to be part of building bridges, not barriers." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her classroom floor as Sarah packed up her materials. Her original citation, now framed beside her teaching certificates, caught the light. Below it hung a new plaque, "Excellence in Community Education Initiative." Principal Rodriguez lingered after others had left. "You know, Sarah, when you first told me about that traffic stop, I never imagined we'd be here." She gestured to the wall of photos, each capturing moments of connection and understanding. "You turned a fine into a revolution of kindness." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the lessons learned and taught over the past year. "That's the thing about teaching," she replied, straightening the student's desk. "The real magic happens when we're brave enough to learn alongside our students." As she locked her classroom door that evening, Sarah paused to read the new banner hanging in the hallway, created collaboratively by students, parents, and community members. "Every challenge is a chance to teach. Every moment is a chance to learn. Every person is a chance to understand."